That Christmas Eve, my sister raised her glass and laughed, telling me I would not last 1 week without this family. I didn't argue. I simply dropped my keys on the linen tablecloth and walked out into the snow. Gripping the sealed envelope my stepmother left me. By morning, my phone wasn't blowing up because they missed me. It was ringing because everything they thought they owned had started locking them out. My name is Madeline Walsh, and for 34 years, I have been the invisible steel beam holding up a crumbling structure painted in gold leaf. In the town of Ashford Glen, Pennsylvania, the name Walsh means something. It means real estate. It means the new shopping plaza on the east side and the luxury condominiums overlooking the river. To the public, my father, Gerald Walsh, is a visionary developer, and my older sister, Sabrina, is the glamorous face of our charitable foundation. To the people who actually read the contracts and balanced the ledgers, I am the only reason neither of them is in prison for tax fraud or bankruptcy. I am the fixer. I am the silence in the room when a mistake needs to be buried. But on this particular Christmas Eve, as the snow drifted against the high-arched windows of the family estate, I realized I was done being the foundation. I was ready to become the demolition crew. The dining room smelled of pine needles, roasted duck, and expensive perfume. It was a scent I associated with anxiety. My father sat at the head of the long mahogany table, swirling a glass of vintage Cabernet that cost more than my first car. He was 62 but looked 50, thanks to a strict regimen of Botox and the lack of a conscience to cause wrinkles. He was mid-monologue, a familiar state for him. He raised his glass, the crystal catching the light of the chandelier. "Another year, another victory for the Walsh Development Group," he announced, his voice booming with the practiced projection of a man who assumes everyone is listening. "We crushed the zoning board on the Highland project. They tried to stick us with those environmental regulations, but we maneuvered right past them." A toast to dominance, a chorus of polite agreements rippled through the guests. It was mostly extended family and a few business partners who were smart enough to nod when Gerald Walsh spoke. I sat near the end of the table, nursing a glass of water. I did not drink around them. One of us had to be sober enough to ensure the alarm system was set and the guests didn't drive into a ditch. Sabrina sat to my father's right. She was 3 years older than me, beautiful in a sharp, angular way, wearing a red silk dress that looked like a spilled glass of wine. She caught my eye and smirked. She hated that I was there. She hated even more that she needed me there. Earlier that day, I had spent 4 hours fixing a payroll error she had caused by firing the accounting firm on a whim because she didn't like the senior partner's tie. I had manually processed the checks for 200 employees so they would get paid before the holiday. Sabrina did not know this. She only knew the problem had gone away. Like magic. "You are awfully quiet tonight, Madeline," Sabrina said, her voice pitching up just enough to cut through the ambient chatter. "It is a party. You could try to look like you are not attending a funeral." I cut a piece of potato on my plate. "I am just tired. Sabrina, it has been a long quarter." Sabrina laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Tired from what you sit in that back office and type on a computer. It is not like you are out there closing deals or managing the image of the company. Daddy and I are out there in the trenches. You are just support staff." My father chuckled, signaling to the table that it was okay to laugh at me. "She has a point. Maddie, you lack the killer instinct. That is why I keep you in operations. You are safe there." I felt a coldness spread through my chest. It was not anger. Anger burns. This was something else. It was the absolute zero of indifference. For 10 years, since I graduated with honors and came home to help them through a liquidity crisis, I had managed every aspect of their lives. I paid the mortgages on the 3 houses. I managed the trusts. I renewed the insurance policies. I kept the IRS from auditing the creative bookkeeping my father insisted on. I was the one who knew the passwords. I was the one who knew where the bodies were buried, metaphorically speaking, though with the way they cut corners on construction safety, perhaps literally too. I looked at my father. I reviewed the Highland contracts. "Dad, the zoning board didn't just let us through. I found the loophole in the grandfather clause from 1998. I wrote the brief your lawyer submitted. Gerald waved a dismissive hand. Details. You get bogged down in details. Madeline, that is why you are small picture. Sabrina leaned forward, her eyes glinting with malice. The wine had made her sloppy and brave. Honestly, Maddie, I don't know why you act so martyred. You live in the guest cottage for free. You drive a company car. You have a salary you barely earn. You have it easy. I put my fork down. The metal clicked against the china. The room went quiet. Not because of me, but because the tension radiating off me suddenly felt physical. I work 80 hours a week. Sabrina, I haven't taken a vacation in 5 years. Sabrina rolled her eyes. Oh, please. You wouldn't know what to do with a vacation. You have no friends. You have no boyfriend. You have nothing except what we give you. Then she smiled, a cruel, wide expression. Go ahead. Leave if you are so miserable. But we both know you won't. You are terrified of the real world. You wouldn't last 1 week without this family. You wouldn't last a week without us. The words hung in the air. You wouldn't last a week. I looked at them, really looked at them. I saw my father, a man who didn't know his own social security number. I saw my sister, a woman who didn't know how to reset her email password or pay a utility bill. They were children playing dress-up in a castle built on a foundation of my sweat and my silence. Something inside me, a tether I hadn't realized was frayed, finally snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was silent, like a heavy rope parting underwater. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. I simply reached into my pocket. I pulled out a heavy key ring. It held the key to the guest cottage, the fob for the company Mercedes, the master key to the corporate office in downtown Ashford Glen, the key to the safety deposit box where the deeds were kept, the key to the terrified silence they demanded of me. I stood up. The chair scraped against the hardwood floor. I walked to the head of the table. Gerald looked up, annoyed. What are you doing? Sit down. You are making a scene. I didn't answer. I dropped the keys onto the white linen tablecloth right next to his wine glass. They landed with a heavy metallic thud that echoed in the sudden silence of the room. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out the company credit card. I placed it on top of the keys. Madeline Sabrina's voice wavered slightly. What is this? I looked her dead in the eyes. The fire in the fireplace crackled, but I felt cold, clean, and sharp. I turned my back on them without a single word. Where are you going? Gerald barked, his face flushing red. You walk out that door, Madeline, and you are cut off. You hear me? Not a penny. I kept walking, past the Christmas tree loaded with ornaments worth more than most people's annual rent, past the foyer with the marble floors I had supervised the installation of 3 years ago. I opened the heavy oak front door. The wind howled, carrying snow into the warm hallway. Madeline Sabrina shrieked, You are making a mistake. You will be back begging by New Year's. I stepped out and closed the door behind me. The latch clicked. It was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I was wearing a thin cashmere sweater and dress slacks. No coat. My coat was in the closet inside. My boots were sturdy, but not meant for a blizzard. The cold hit me like a physical blow, biting into my skin, turning my breath into white clouds. But I didn't turn back. I walked down the long, winding driveway, the snow crunching under my feet. As I walked, my hand went to the back pocket of my slacks. I felt the crinkle of paper. A year ago, on her deathbed, my stepmother Helen had given me a plain white envelope. Helen was the only person in that house who had ever looked at me and seen a human being rather than a utility. She had married my father when I was 10, and for 20 years, she had tried to shield me. But she was sick for a long time, and as she faded, she saw the wolves closing in. 2 days before she died, she pulled me close, her grip surprisingly strong for a woman who weighed less than 100 pounds. She pressed the envelope into my hand. Do not open this yet. Madeline, she had whispered, her voice raspy. Not while you are still trying to save them. You have a savior complex. Honey, you get it from your mother. You think if you just work hard enough, They will love you. They won't. I had cried then, holding her hand. Keep this, she said. Hide it. Wait until the day comes when you finally walk out. Wait until you really leave. Not just a fight. The end. When that day comes, open it. I had carried that envelope in my purse every day for 12 months. Tonight, when I went to the bathroom before dinner to wash my face and compose myself after Sabrina's insults, I had moved it from my purse to my pocket. Subconsciously, I think I knew. I knew tonight was the night. I reached the wrought iron gates at the end of the driveway. I punched in the code. 4815. The gates swung open. I walked through and didn't look back at the mansion glowing on the hill. It looked like a postcard. It felt like a prison. I walked for 2 miles toward the town center. The snow was getting heavier. My fingers were numb. My ears burned with the frost. I found a bench in the small park near the town square. Under the gazebo, where the high school band played in the summer, I sat down, shivering violently, my arms wrapped around myself. I pulled out my phone. It was vibrating continuously. 17 missed calls, 12 text messages. I looked at the notifications, expecting anger, expecting my father to be raging about my disrespect, expecting Sabrina to be mocking me, but the texts were different. Madeline, what is the passcode for the alarm? It is going off and the panel is locked. This was from my father, Maddie. The lighting system just shut down. I can't get it back on. The app says user not authorized. Fix it. This was from Sabrina. Ms. Walsh, this is the security company. We have a master reset signal coming from your credentials. We cannot override it without your voice authorization. Madeline, why is my Amex declining? I tried to order champagne. Call the bank. I stared at the screen, my frozen lips curling into a smile. They weren't calling to ask if I was freezing to death in a blizzard. They weren't calling to ask if I had a place to sleep. They were calling because the ecosystem I built, the digital and logistical web that kept their lives functioning, was keyed to me. I hadn't done it on purpose. Or maybe I had. Maybe, in the back of my mind. I had always known this war was coming, over the years. Every time I set up an account, every time I registered a utility, every time I configured a smart home device, I used my credentials. Not theirs, mine. Because it was easier. Because they couldn't be bothered to remember a password. And when I walked out, I didn't just leave. I stopped maintaining the illusion. My phone buzzed again. A new message. The number was not saved in my contacts, but I recognized the area code. I saw the device tracker leave the estate. If you need a safe harbor, the office is warm. The key is under the third planter. M. Lane, Mara Lane, my stepmother's estate attorney, a woman known in legal circles as the Barracuda of the East Coast. Helen had spent a lot of time with her in the final months. I had assumed they were just updating the will. I looked at the envelope in my hand. The paper was damp with snowflakes. My father called again. I watched the screen light up with his face. He looked so authoritative in the photo. He looked helpless now. I pressed the button on the side of the phone and silenced the call. The cold was seeping into my bones. But for the first time in my life, the fire inside me was hotter. Sabrina had said I wouldn't last a week. She thought I was the parasite. She thought I was the one clinging to the hull of their great ship. She was wrong. I wasn't the barnacle. I was the buoyancy. I stood up, my legs stiff. I knew where Mara Lane's office was. It was a 20-minute walk. I could make it. I had survived 34 years of emotional hypothermia. I could survive 20 minutes of actual snow. I looked at the envelope one last time, tracing Helen's handwriting. For Madeline. I didn't open it yet. I put it back in my pocket. I wanted to savor this moment, the moment before the revelation, the moment where I realized that while I was walking into the dark, they were the ones who were truly afraid of the lights going out. They thought they were punishing me by letting me walk away. They didn't understand that by forcing me out, they had just fired the captain of the Titanic after the iceberg had already been struck. I turned toward town, the wind at my back now. Tomorrow, I would find out why Helen had been so sure I would need this envelope, but I already knew one thing for certain. Tomorrow, I would find out exactly why they were panicking, and I was going to enjoy every single second of it. The sunlight that hit my face the next morning was not the filtered, curtain-draped glow I was used to in the guest cottage. It was harsh, unfiltered, and smelled faintly of industrial bleach and stale cigarettes. I rolled over, my back protesting against the mattress of the roadside motel I had checked into at 2 a.m. It was a place called the Sleepy Pine, the kind of establishment where you paid in cash, and nobody asked why a woman in a cashmere sweater and dress slacks was checking in with absolutely no luggage. I stared at the popcorn ceiling for a long moment, the silence of the room pressing in on me. For a split second, the old reflex kicked in, the internal clock that screamed I was late. I needed to be up. I needed to check the global markets for my father. I needed to make sure the landscaping crew was approved for the south lawn. I needed to transfer the funds for Sabrina's credit card payment before interest accrued. Then, the memory of the keys hitting the linen tablecloth crashed back into me. I didn't have to do any of that. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. The battery was at 12%. The notification screen was a wall of panic. It was not a list of concerned inquiries about my safety. It was a digital crime scene of incompetence. I sat up and began to scroll. A dark, dry amusement bubbling in my chest. There were 42 missed calls, 20 from my father, 15 from Sabrina, 7 from my mother, Marianne. Marianne had divorced my father 20 years ago, but she had never divorced the lifestyle. She lived in a condo in Florida that the Walsh Family Trust paid for, every month. I authorized the transfer that kept her in Pilates classes and white wine. I opened her voicemail first. Her voice was shrill, breathless. Madeline, pick up. Your father called me screaming. He says the automatic transfer for my HOA fees bounced. It has never bounced. He says he cannot get into the banking portal to fix it. He says you changed the passwords. Fix this immediately. Madeline, do you know how embarrassing it is to get a delinquency notice? Call me. I deleted it. Then I played one from my father. Time stamped at 7:30 that morning. Madeline, enough games. I am at the office. The server is locked. It is asking for a biometric scan. Since when do we have biometric security? And why does the tax portal say the administrator is offline? I have the auditors coming in 3 days. If you are not here by 9 o'clock, I am calling the police and reporting the company car stolen. I laughed out loud. It was a rusty sound. He couldn't call the police. If he called the police, they would ask who the car was registered to. And he was about to find out that answer was not the one he expected. I scrolled through the text messages. They told a story of escalating logistical failure. From Sabrina, the gate won't open. I'm stuck inside. The keypad is dead. From Sabrina, I called the gate guy. He says he can't run a service call without authorization from the account holder. Tell him to come. From Gerald, why is the power off in the East Wing? The electric company says the bill is past due. I told you to pay that last week. From Gerald, they won't talk to me. They say I'm not the primary account holder. What did you do? I swung my legs out of bed and stood up. My clothes were wrinkled, but I felt cleaner than I had in years. They were discovering the reality of their existence. They thought they were the masters of the universe, but they were actually just authorized users on an account I had been managing for a decade. I splashed cold water on my face, finger-combed my hair, and walked out into the biting cold. I grabbed a coffee from the gas station across the street, black, bitter, and $1, and began the walk to downtown Ashford Glen. Mara Lane's law office was located in a brownstone building that smelled of old mahogany and serious money. It was the kind of place that didn't advertise, because the people who needed Mara Lane already knew where to find her. The receptionist, a woman named Beverly who had been there since the Reagan administration, didn't ask for my name. She simply nodded and pointed toward the heavy double doors at the end of the hall. Go right in, Ms. Walsh. She's expecting you. I pushed the doors open. Mara Lane was standing by the window, looking out at the snow-covered street. She was a small woman, sharp as a tack, dressed in a charcoal suit that cost more than my father's car. She turned as I entered. You look terrible. Madeline, she said. Thank you, I replied, sinking into one of the leather chairs. I feel fantastic. Mara sat down behind her desk. On the polished wood surface, there was a stack of files, thick, heavy files, and a steaming mug of tea waiting for me. I assume the phone has been ringing, she asked. Non-stop. They can't get into the bank accounts. The electric company won't talk to them. My father is threatening to report the car stolen. Mara smiled, a tight, predatory expression. He can report it all he wants. It is hard to steal a car that is registered to your own name. I paused, the coffee cup halfway to my mouth. I know I'm the primary driver. Mara. But the company owns the fleet. Mara opened the first file folder. She spun it around so it faced me. Take a look at the title transfer. Madeline. Date of execution. 4 years ago. I looked at the document. It was a standard vehicle title. Owner Madeline R. Walsh. Not Walsh Development Group. Me. My stepmother was a very smart woman, Mara said softly, and she knew your father better than anyone. 5 years ago, when the market took a dip, Gerald was panicked about liability. He wanted to shield assets. He wanted to move things out of his name so creditors couldn't touch them if the Highland project went belly up. He asked Helen to help him structure some shell holding companies. I nodded slowly. I remember that. He said it was standard asset protection. It was. Mara agreed. But Gerald never reads the fine print. He never reads anything longer than a menu. He signed the power of attorney documents giving Helen full control to restructure the personal and corporate assets. And Helen used that power. She didn't move them into shell companies owned by him. She moved them into trusts and holding entities where the beneficiary and the controlling trustee is you. I stared at her. Mara flipped open the next file. This is the deed to the main estate on Crestview Drive. Owner, the Helen Walsh. Revocable trust. Upon her death, the trust became irrevocable. The sole trustee is Madeline Walsh. She flipped another page. The cabin at Raven Ridge. Owner Madeline Walsh. She flipped another. The undeveloped land by the lake. Owner Madeline Walsh. My hands started to tremble. This wasn't just bookkeeping. This was a coup. But why, I asked. My voice barely a whisper. Why didn't he know? Because nothing changed. Mara said, you kept paying the bills. You kept signing the checks. You managed the accounts. As long as the lights stayed on and the wine cellar stayed stocked, Gerald didn't care whose name was on the deed. He assumed he owned it because he lived there. He assumed he owned you. So by extension, he owned what you had. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. Helen knew that one day he would turn on you, or she knew that one day you would finally have enough. She wanted to make sure that when you walked out that door, you didn't leave empty-handed. She built a fortress around you. Madeline, all you had to do was step inside and lock the gate. I looked at the stack of papers. It was overwhelming. I wasn't just the fixer. I was the landlord. Wait, I said, a sudden panic seizing me. If I own the house, and I own the utilities accounts, am I liable? Can they sue me for shutting them off? Mara shook her head. You didn't shut them off. The bank accounts were frozen because of suspicious activity, which is technically true. Since unauthorized users were trying to access them, the utilities are flagged for verification because the billing address doesn't match the residency claims. It is a bureaucratic nightmare. Certainly. But it is not a crime. You are simply correcting the records. She tapped the desk. The system is not broken. Madeline, the system is finally working. It is just returning the assets to the legal owner. You? I sat back, the leather creaking. My father wasn't just calling me because he needed a password. He was calling me because, legally speaking, he was a squatter in my house. There is one more thing, Mara said. She reached into her drawer and pulled out a letter opener. You still have the envelope I reached into my pocket. The envelope was wrinkled, bent at the corners from my night on the park bench. I placed it on the desk. Mara nodded. She wanted you to read that here, in a place where you felt safe. I picked up the letter opener. My hands were steady now. I sliced the top of the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of Helen's personal stationery. It smelled like lavender, her signature scent. The handwriting was shaky. She must have written it near the very end, but the words were clear. My dearest Madeline. If you are reading this, you finally did it. You finally chose yourself. I know you feel guilty. I know you feel like you are betraying them. You are not. You are simply stopping the betrayal of yourself. Your father loves the idea of being a king, but a king needs a kingdom. And he never built one. He stole one, and he used you to maintain the walls. I moved the assets not just to protect the money, but to protect you. They will say you are stealing. They will scream and threaten. But remember this, you cannot steal what was given to you to keep safe. Do not go back to save the people who used you. Do not go back to patch the holes in a sinking ship that they drilled themselves. Let it sink. You have your own boat now. Be the woman I saw when you were 10 years old, standing up to the bullies at school. Be brave. Be ruthless if you have to. But be free. Love, Helen. I read the letter twice, then a third time. For years. I had thought Helen was passive. I thought she was just like me, quiet, accommodating, trying to keep the peace. I was wrong. She hadn't been passive. She had been preparing for war. She had been smuggling weapons under the floorboards for 20 years, waiting for me to be ready to pick them up. I looked up at Mara. There were no tears in my eyes. The sadness had evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. What do I do now? I asked. Mara closed the files. Now, you let me handle the legal notices. I will send a courier to the estate informing Mr. Walsh and Sabrina that they have 30 days to vacate the premises or sign a lease agreement at fair market value. I will notify the bank that you are the sole authorized signer and that any attempt by Gerald to access the funds is fraud. She paused. And you? You get a new phone number. You check into a better hotel. And you watch. I stood up. I picked up the files. They felt heavy, but it was a good weight. It was the weight of armor. I walked out of Mara Lane's office into the mid-morning light. The snow had stopped falling. The air was crisp and biting. My phone buzzed in my pocket again. Another demand. Another threat. Another desperate plea from the people who had told me I wouldn't last a week. I took the phone out. I looked at it one last time. Then, I walked over to the trash can on the corner of the street. I didn't throw the phone away. I needed the evidence. But I powered it down. I watched the screen go black. The silence that followed was absolute. I took a deep breath. The air tasted like ice and pine. For the first time in 34 years, I didn't feel the crushing weight of the Walsh Empire on my shoulders. I felt the ground under my feet, and it was my ground. I hailed a cab. Where to? Lady, the driver asked. Take me to the dealership. I said, I need to buy a car. One that nobody can report stolen. And then, I smiled. It was a small, dangerous smile. My sister said I wouldn't last a week without them. I checked my watch. It had been 14 hours. And I wasn't just lasting. I was just getting started. I sat in the window seat of a coffee shop called The Daily Grind, watching the citizens of Ashford Glen rush through their post-Christmas errands. It was a mundane scene, people clutching lattes, adjusting scarves, complaining about the slush on the sidewalks. But to me, it looked like a foreign film. For the first time in my adult life, I was not running. I was not coordinating a catering delivery. I was not on the phone with a contractor explaining why he needed to prioritize my father's vanity project over a leaking roof at the orphanage. I was just a woman with a $4 cappuccino and a very interesting secret. I knew Sabrina would find me. It was inevitable. Ashford Glen is not Manhattan. There are only 3 places to get a decent espresso, and my sister refuses to drink anything that does not come with foam art. At 10:30 in the morning, the bell above the door chimed aggressively. I did not need to look up to know who it was. The sudden drop in atmospheric pressure in the room was a dead giveaway. Sabrina marched in. She was wearing her oversized sunglasses, likely to hide the fact that she had not slept, and a fur-lined coat that looked ridiculous in a casual cafe. She scanned the room like a predator looking for a wounded gazelle. When her eyes landed on me, she didn't wave, she didn't smile. She stormed over, her heels clicking a staccato rhythm of pure rage against the laminate floor. She slammed her purse onto the table, causing my coffee to ripple. "Fix it," she hissed. I took a slow sip of my cappuccino. "Good morning to you too. Sabrina?" Would you like a croissant? They are quite fresh. Don't play dumb with me. Madeline, she snapped, pulling out a chair and sitting down as if her legs had suddenly given out. You know exactly what is happening. The system is broken. Everything is broken. I looked at her calmly. Which system? Specifically, all of them. She lowered her voice, conscious of the barista glancing our way. I went to the country club this morning for my tennis lesson. They told me my membership was on hold. Pending a billing update. On hold. Madeline, do you know who I am? I am a Walsh. We founded that club. I nodded. Actually, Grandfather Walsh was a founding member. You just inherited the locker. She ignored me. Then I went to the pharmacy. My card was declined. Not for insufficient funds, but for unauthorized user. She leaned across the table, her face inches from mine. I had to pay cash. Cash, Madeline, like a tourist. It sounds like a frustrating morning, I said, keeping my voice level. It is not frustrating. It is a glitch. And you are the administrator, so log in. Reset the permissions, and apologize to Daddy before he decides to really punish you. I set my cup down. I am not the administrator anymore. Sabrina, I quit. Remember I left the keys. Sabrina let out a short, sharp laugh. You can't quit being a Walsh. You can't quit your family. You are just having a tantrum. Now, Daddy is furious. He tried to transfer funds from the primary operating account to cover the construction loan interest, and the bank locked him out. They said the account requires a countersignature from the account owner. She paused, and then the truth slipped out, tumbling from her lips before she could catch it. She looked at me with genuine confusion. Mr. Henderson at the bank said the system has you listed as the sole proprietor. He said he cannot move a single dime without your physical presence. I leaned back, crossing my arms. That is an interesting glitch. It is a clerical error, Sabrina shouted, causing a woman at the next table to jump. Obviously, Helen messed up the paperwork years ago. She probably put your name down as a placeholder and forgot to switch it back to Daddy. We need you to come down to the bank and sign the correction forms. Correction forms. That was how she saw it. My ownership was a typo. My control was a mistake. I am not going to the bank. Sabrina. And it is not an error. Her eyes narrowed behind her sunglasses. She took them off, revealing eyes that were bloodshot and rimmed with smudged mascara. What are you saying? I am saying that the bank is correct. I am the owner. Sabrina stared at me. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked like a fish pulled out of water, gasping for air. You own the estate. Own the company accounts. She laughed again, but this time it was nervous. You don't own anything. Madeline, you are the help. You are the one we keep around to handle the boring stuff. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Sabrina's face hardened. Listen to me. You are going to fix this. If you don't, I will make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of person you are. I will tell them you stole from a dying woman. I will tell them you are mentally unstable. I will drag your name through the mud until you can't get a job bagging groceries at the supermarket. She was leaning in, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. We will hold a family meeting tonight. You will come. You will sign the papers, and you will beg for forgiveness. If you do that, maybe Daddy will let you keep the car. I looked at my sister. I saw the fear behind the threat. She was terrified. She had no skills. She had no money of her own. She had no identity outside of being Sabrina Walsh. The heiress. Is this a family? Sabrina. I asked quietly, or is this an operation, what you want a family meeting? But you are talking about transactions. You are talking about assets. You haven't asked me once why I left. You haven't asked if I have a place to stay. You are just mad that the ATM stopped dispensing cash. Sabrina slammed her hand on the table. Because you are being selfish. You are ruining everything because you didn't get enough attention at Christmas dinner. Grow up just then. My phone rang. It was sitting face up on the table between us. The screen displayed a number I recognized. Though it wasn't saved, it was the generic line for the county administrative office. I looked at the phone, then at Sabrina. Answer it, she commanded. It is probably Daddy's lawyer ready to sue you. I picked up the phone and pressed the speaker button. Hello, I said. A woman's voice, dry and professional, floated out of the speaker. "Good morning. Is this Madeline Walsh?" "Yes, this is she. This is Linda from the County Tax Assessor's Office. We received the digital notification regarding the change of address for the property tax bills associated with the Walsh estate on Crestview Drive and the commercial properties downtown." I saw Sabrina's eyes go wide. "We just need a verbal confirmation from the record owner to finalize the update," the woman continued. "We are removing Gerald Walsh and Sabrina Walsh from the authorized correspondence list, as per the instructions in the trust deed. Is that correct?" The cafe seemed to go silent. Sabrina was shaking her head violently, mouthing the word, "No." She reached for the phone. But I pulled it back. I looked directly into my sister's eyes. "Yes, Linda," I said, my voice steady and clear. "That is correct. Please remove them. I am the sole owner. All future correspondence should go to the address I provided to my attorney. Thank you. Ms. Walsh, the update is immediate. Have a good day." The line went dead. Sabrina looked as if I had just shot her. She was pale, her lips trembling. "You just couldn't finish the sentence." I just confirmed reality. I said, Sabrina stood up so fast her chair fell backward with a loud crash. The entire coffee shop turned to look. She didn't care. The veneer of sophistication was gone. She was just a frightened, angry child. "You bitch," she spat. "You selfish, ungrateful bitch. Daddy is going to destroy you." I stood up too. I was calm. I was terrifyingly calm. "He can try," I said, "but he is going to have a hard time paying for the lawsuit when he can't even pay the electric bill." Sabrina grabbed her purse. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the strap. "You think you are so smart. You think you can just burn it all down. You are nothing without us. You are nothing." I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had given her in years. "You are wrong, Sabrina. I didn't burn it down. I just stopped holding it up. I stopped being the life raft you all stood on so you wouldn't get your feet wet." Sabrina let out a scream of frustration, a guttural, ugly sound that had no place in a polite society. She turned and ran for the door. She shoved past a man entering with a stroller, nearly knocking him over. As she burst onto the sidewalk, she turned back and screamed my name. Madeline. People on the street stopped and stared. Sabrina Walsh, the town's golden girl, was screaming at a coffee shop window like a lunatic. She realized people were watching. She realized she had lost control. She covered her face with her hand and hurried toward her car, which I knew was low on gas, and for which she had no credit card to refill. I sat back down. The adrenaline was humming in my veins, but my hands were steady. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my father. "You are destroying this family. I hope you are happy. Fix this now, or you are dead to me." I looked at the message. A week ago, that text would have made me cry. It would have sent me into a panic attack. I would have driven home, apologized, and spent the night fixing the mess. Now it just looked like leverage. I took a screenshot of the text. I opened a new folder on my phone. I named the folder Evidence. I took another sip of my cappuccino. It was cold, but it tasted like victory. I had not just survived the morning, I had drawn a line in the sand. And for the first time, I wasn't the one standing on the sinking side. The waitress came over, looking concerned. "Is everything okay? Miss, do you need me to call someone?" I looked up at her and smiled. "No, thank you. Everything is perfectly fine. I was just catching up with my sister." I left a $20 tip on the table cash and walked out. The air outside was still freezing, but the cold didn't bother me anymore. I had a fire of my own now, and I had a feeling that by the time the sun went down, the heat coming from the Walsh estate would be visible from space. The drive to Raven Ridge was a 40-minute ascent into a world that felt entirely separate from the manicured lawns of Ashford Glen. The roads here were narrow, winding ribbons of asphalt flanked by dense pine forests that swallowed the sound of the engine. I drove my new car, a sensible, nondescript sedan that I had paid for with a cashier's check an hour ago, watching the thermometer on the dashboard drop with every mile of elevation. By the time I reached the turnoff for the cabin, The temperature was 12 degrees, and the air outside looked sharp enough to cut glass. The cabin sat on a bluff overlooking the valley. It was not a rustic shack. It was a modern A-frame structure made of cedar and stone, with floor-to-ceiling windows that Helen had loved. She used to call this place the place of truth. She said the altitude made it harder to lie because the air was too thin to waste on deceit. I pulled into the driveway, the tires crunching on the pristine snow. I had not been here in 6 months, not since I came up to supervise the repair of the deck, but the key on my ring slid into the lock with a smooth, silent precision. Inside, the air was still and cold, smelling faintly of cedar and the vanilla candles Helen used to burn. I did not turn on the heat immediately. I wanted the cold. It kept me alert. It kept the edge on my anger, which had settled into a hard, dense knot in my chest. I walked straight to the master bedroom, in the back of the walk-in closet, behind a row of heavy winter coats that still smelled like her perfume. There was a false panel in the wall. Helen had shown it to me once, years ago, when she was first diagnosed. She had treated it like a game then, a secret hiding spot for birthday presents. But in her letter, the one I had read in Mara's office, she had been specific. Look in the panel. Madeline, look for the mahogany box. I pushed the panel. It clicked and sprang open. Inside sat a polished wooden box, about the size of a shoebox, with a heavy brass latch. It was sealed with a piece of red wax, and dramatic flair that was so unlike Helen's usual practicality that it made my stomach turn. Taped to the top was a note card. If you are opening this, they have turned on you. I carried the box to the large oak dining table in the main room. The winter light streamed in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I broke the wax seal. It snapped with a dry crack. I lifted the lid. I expected jewelry. I expected sentimental letters. I expected memories. Instead, I found a crime scene. The box was packed tight with documents. I pulled out the first stack. It was a credit card application for a platinum business line of credit with a limit of $50,000. The date was from 3 years ago. The applicant was Madeline Walsh. The social security number was mine. The address was my cottage. But the signature at the bottom was not mine. It was a good attempt. It had the same slant, the same general shape of the M. But the loop on the W was too tight. It was the way Sabrina wrote her W. I turned the page. There were bank statements for this card, charges for luxury hotels in Paris, charges for designer handbags, charges for a spa retreat in Arizona. I remembered that retreat. Sabrina had gone there to find herself after a breakup. She had told me Daddy paid for it. He hadn't. I had. Or rather, a credit identity stolen in my name had paid for it. I dug deeper. There were loan documents for a commercial construction bridge loan. $300,000. The co-signer was Madeline Walsh. The signature was a shaky imitation of mine, likely done by my father after a few glasses of scotch. My hands started to shake, not from the cold, but from a rage so pure it felt like clarity. They hadn't just used me to manage their legitimate money. They had used my clean credit score, my unblemished financial history, as a dumping ground for their debt. They had leveraged my future to pay for their present. Beneath the financial documents, there was a stack of printed emails. Helen must have accessed my father's server. From Gerald Walsh to Sabrina Walsh. Subject: the audit problem. Don't worry about the liquidity ratio. I move the liability to the M.W. holding account. If the auditors ask, Madeline handles that sector. We can claim it was an administrative oversight on her part. She never checks the details anyway. From Sabrina Walsh to Gerald Walsh. Subject re: the audit problem. Are you sure? What if she sees the credit report? From Gerald Walsh to Sabrina Walsh. Subject re: the audit problem. She won't. I have her mail forwarded to the main office for security. I shred the statements before she sees them. She trusts us. Sweetheart, that is her fatal flaw. I read the email 3 times. She trusts us. That is her fatal flaw. I felt a physical nausea rise in my throat. I had spent my life thinking I was not good enough for them. I thought I was the disappointing daughter who lacked the vision, the charisma, the spark. But they didn't see me as a daughter at all. I was a human shield. I was the fall guy they were grooming for the day. The music stopped. At the bottom of the box was a silver USB drive. I went to my bag, pulled out my laptop, and plugged it in. There was only one file folder. It was titled The Insurance Policy. I clicked on an audio file dated 14 months ago, 2 months before Helen died. The sound of my stepmother's voice filled the silent cabin. She sounded weak. Her breathing labored, but her tone was steel. Helen, you cannot do this. Gerald, it is fraud. It is a federal crime. Gerald, keep your voice down. It is not fraud. It is creative accounting. The company needs cash flow. Madeline has the credit. We are just borrowing it. We will pay it back. Helen, you won't pay it back. You never pay it back. You are sinking. Gerald, and you are strapping weights to her ankles so you can float. Sabrina's voice cut in, sharp and dismissive. Oh, stop being dramatic. Helen, Maddie doesn't care. She would sign the papers herself if we asked her. She is desperate to please. We are just saving her the trouble of reading the fine print. Gerald, exactly. It is just paper. Helen, just paper. If things go south, the company takes the hit. Madeline pleads ignorance. She gets a slap on the wrist. She doesn't have a reputation to lose like I do. Helen, she is your daughter, Gerald. She is an asset, and right now, she is the only asset I have left that isn't mortgaged to the hilt. I stopped the recording. I sat there in the freezing cabin, staring at the snow-covered trees outside. A bird flew past, a flash of red cardinal against the white. It was so beautiful. The world was so beautiful. And the people who raised me were monsters. I didn't cry. The time for crying had passed. Crying is what you do when you are hurt. I wasn't hurt anymore. I was armed. I clicked on the next folder in the drive. It was labeled Forensic Analysis. I opened the document. My breath caught in my throat. Helen hadn't just recorded them. She had hired a private forensic accountant and a handwriting expert a year before she died. The file contained a sworn affidavit from a handwriting analyst stating that the signatures on the loan documents were high-probability forgeries, and identifying the specific pressure points that matched Gerald's handwriting samples. There was another document, a signed statement from Helen, notarized by Mara Lane. I, Helen Walsh, being of sound mind, testify that my husband, Gerald Walsh, and stepdaughter, Sabrina Walsh, have engaged in a systematic scheme to defraud lenders using the identity of Madeline Walsh without her knowledge or consent. I have witnessed them practicing her signature. I have witnessed them intercepting her mail. This compilation of evidence is intended to serve as Madeline's defense should they attempt to implicate her in their financial crimes. It was a shield. She had built me a bulletproof shield. She knew. She knew that when the empire started to crumble, Gerald would not go down with the ship. He would throw me overboard to lighten the load. He would blame the administrator. He would blame the operational manager. He would send his own daughter to prison to save his country club membership. I closed the laptop. I stood up and walked to the window. For years, I had carried the guilt of not being enough. I had carried the shame of being the dull, practical Walsh. I had stayed because I thought they needed me. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the window. My face looked different. The softness around my eyes was gone. My jaw was set. I wasn't the victim here. Victims are helpless. I was the prosecutor. I went back to the table and began to organize the papers. I didn't just shove them back in the box. I sorted them. Pile 1 identity theft, Pile 2 wire fraud, Pile 3 conspiracy. I was creating a case file. My phone, which I had turned back on to check the time, buzzed on the table. It was a text message, not from my family, from Ethan Price accountant Madeline. Please, I know you are not at the office. I know what is happening with the accounts. Gerald just called me. He wants me to backdate some ledgers to show you authorized the transfers to the offshore shell. He is trying to build a paper trail against you. I haven't done it yet. I am scared. Can we meet? I have the originals. Ethan Price, the timid man who wore sweater vests and always brought donuts on Fridays. He was the weak link. Gerald was pressuring him to frame me. just as Helen predicted. I typed a reply. My fingers were steady. Meet me at the diner on Route 9 in 1 hour. Bring everything. If you lie to me, Ethan, you go down with them. If you give me the originals, you might walk away. I hit send. I looked around the cabin one last time. It didn't feel cold anymore. It felt like a command center. I put the documents back into the box, but I kept the USB drive in my pocket. I locked the box. I would take it all to Mara tomorrow. But first, I had to secure the witness. I walked out to the car. The wind had picked up, whipping the snow into small cyclones. I looked back at the cabin, the place of truth. The truth was a brutal thing. It didn't set you free with a hug. It set you free by cutting the ropes that bound you, even if the knife nicked your skin. My father had said I was an asset. He was right, but he forgot the most important rule of asset management. Liquidity works both ways. I started the engine. I wasn't running away from them. I was driving toward the final demolition. They had drained me for decades, sipping my life like vintage wine. But the bottle was empty now, and I was about to show them what happens when you try to drink from broken glass. The drive back up to the cabin was a blur of white snow and black asphalt. I had not met Ethan at the diner. 5 minutes before our scheduled meeting, my phone had rung. It was Ethan, and he sounded like he was calling from inside a closet. He told me he couldn't make it. He told me Gerald had his assistant watching the accounting department like a hawk, logging every time someone left their desk. So, instead of a physical handoff, we spoke in hushed, terrified tones while I sat in my car in the diner parking lot, the heater blasting against the freezing Pennsylvania air, now back inside the safety of Raven Ridge. His words were still echoing in my ears, bouncing around the empty cedar room like trapped birds. He is not just shifting money. Madeline. Ethan had stammered. It is a debt pyramid. He is taking out high-interest, short-term loans to pay off the interest on the older loans. But he is doing it exclusively in your name. He is keeping his own personal credit profile pristine. He is terrified of his credit score dropping below 700 because he needs to refinance the commercial plaza next month, so he is dumping the toxic debt onto you. He is using your social security number like a trash can. I stood by the window, watching the sun begin to dip behind the mountains. The sky was turning a bruised purple. He is going to frame me. Isn't he? I had asked. Ethan's silence had been the loudest thing I had ever heard. Yes, he finally whispered. He has a meeting with a criminal defense attorney tomorrow morning. Not for him. He is going to claim he just discovered irregularities in your management. He is going to say you embezzled the funds and took out loans to cover your tracks. Madeline, you need to be ready. I was ready. I called Mara Lane immediately after hanging up with Ethan. I put the phone on speaker and set it on the kitchen island while I paced the room. Mara was all business. The warmth from our morning meeting was gone, replaced by the sharp, metallic precision of a wartime general. We get ahead of it, Mara said. We do not wait for him to file. I am drafting a preemptive affidavit based on Helen's evidence. And Madeline, I am filing for a temporary restraining order, not just for physical protection, but to establish a legal record of intimidation. If he comes near you, or if Sabrina comes near you, we want it documented that they are the aggressors. Do it, I said. I hung up. The cabin was silent again, but it was a heavy silence, the kind that comes before a storm. I didn't have to wait long. At 4:30 in the afternoon, just as the twilight was turning into true darkness, I saw the headlights. They cut through the trees at the bottom of the driveway, two bright beams jerking erratically as the car navigated the unplowed snow. It was not my father's car. It was Sabrina's SUV. I felt a spike of adrenaline, but I forced myself to remain still. I checked the doors, locked. I checked the deadbolts, engaged. I turned off the main lights in the living room so I could see out without being seen. The SUV skidded to a halt near my new sedan. The doors flew open. Sabrina stepped out first. She was not dressed for the mountains. She was wearing heeled boots that sank immediately into the snow. My mother, Marianne, climbed out the passenger side. She was wrapped in a white fur coat that looked like it cost more than the cabin itself. They marched toward the front door. I could see their breath puffing in the frigid air. I moved to the side of the window, taking out my phone. I opened the video camera app. I hit record. The pounding started a moment later. It wasn't a polite knock. It was a fist hammering against the wood. "Madeline, open this door. It is Mom. Open the door right now." Marianne's voice was high and thin, piercing through the thick cedar walls. I didn't move. I stood in the shadows, filming the door. Madeline. "This is ridiculous. It is freezing out here." Then came Sabrina's voice. "Madeline, we know you are in there. We saw the car. Open the door, or I'm going to break a window." I glanced at the timestamp on the video. 4:42 in the afternoon. I did not answer. To engage was to lose. If I opened the door, if I spoke to them, I gave them an opening. I gave them a chance to manipulate, to gaslight, to twist my words. Silence was the one language they didn't know how to translate. The pounding stopped, replaced by the sound of them trying the handle. The metal rattled violently. Sabrina moved to the large front window, shielding her eyes to peer inside. Her face was pressed against the glass, distorted and ugly with rage. "I see you," she screamed. "I see you standing there, you ungrateful little brat. Do you have any idea what you have done? Daddy is in the hospital. He is having heart palpitations because of you. It was a lie. I knew it was a lie." Gerald Walsh didn't have a heart to palpitate. Marianne took a different tactic. She moved to the window, her face softening into a mask of tragic concern. "Madeline, honey, please, we are just worried about you. You are having a breakdown. We want to help you. Just let us in. We can talk about this. We can fix the accounts together. Daddy isn't mad. He is just hurt. Please, baby, open the door for Mommy." My stomach churned. It was a performance. It was the same performance she had given every time she overspent her allowance and needed me to beg Gerald for more money. Mommy needs help. Mommy is the victim. I zoomed in on her face. I wanted the jury or just the judge to see the swift transition from concern to malice when I didn't respond. Sure enough, when the door stayed shut, Marianne's face hardened. "Open the goddamn door." "Madeline, do you know who pays for your life? Do you know who you are dealing with?" And then, the phone in my hand buzzed with a notification that made my blood run cold. It was an alert from the bank, not a text, but a security push notification from the primary holding account app. Alert: high-value withdrawal attempt detected. Location: Ashford Glen Main Branch. Method: power of attorney hard copy. Amount: $250,000. I stared at the screen. They weren't just here to scream at me. This was a diversion, or maybe a coordinated attack. While Sabrina and Marianne kept me pinned down at the cabin, Gerald or someone working for him was at the bank, physically trying to drain the liquid cash using a forged document. My father was trying to cash out before the freeze fully took hold. I switched apps and called Mara. I kept my voice low, turning away from the window. "They are here," I whispered. "Sabrina and Marianne. They are trying to break in. And someone is at the bank right now with a fake power of attorney trying to withdraw $250,000. Mara didn't hesitate. "I am calling the sheriff for the trespassing," she said, "and I am calling the bank's fraud department directly. I know the risk manager there. Hold tight, Madeline. Do not open that door." I hung up and looked back at the window. Sabrina had picked up a rock from the garden border. She was weighing it in her hand, looking at the large pane of glass. I stepped into the light. I wanted her to see me. I wanted her to see that I wasn't cowering. I held up my phone, showing her the screen, showing her that I was recording. Sabrina hesitated. She looked at the rock, then at me, then at the phone. She knew what a lawsuit looked like. She dropped the rock. It landed with a dull thud in the snow. "Coward," she screamed, her voice cracking. "You are a coward, Madeline. You hide behind locked doors while we lose everything." "You didn't lose it," I said, my voice muffled by the glass, but audible enough. "You spent it." Suddenly, blue and red lights washed over the trees at the bottom of the driveway. The sheriff's cruiser pulled up behind Sabrina's SUV. I watched as 2 deputies stepped out. They were local guys, big and calm. They knew the Walsh name, but they also knew the law. I saw Sabrina spin around, her indignation radiating off her like heat waves. I saw her gesturing wildly, pointing at the cabin, pointing at her car. I saw the deputy shake his head. He pointed toward the road. Marianne tried to grab the deputy's arm, a fatal error in judgment. He stepped back, his hand resting on his belt. It wasn't aggressive, but it was a clear boundary. I couldn't hear the words, but the body language was undeniable. Leave, now. Sabrina looked back at the cabin one last time. If looks could burn, the cedar wood would have turned to ash, but she was powerless. For the first time in her life, her last name was not a get-out-of-jail-free card. They got back into the SUV. The deputy waited until they backed out of the driveway and started down the mountain road. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 20 years. My knees felt weak, and I slumped against the wall. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, shaking exhaustion. My phone chimed again. From Gerald Walsh. You think this is over? You think you can humiliate my wife and daughter with the police I made you, Madeline, and I can unmake you. I am coming up there, and I am not leaving until you sign those papers. I read the text. It was meant to be terrifying. It was meant to send me running into the woods. But as I looked at the words, I didn't see a threat. I saw a confession. He was coming because he had no other choice. The bank heist had failed. The alert on my phone had updated to transaction declined. The intimidation squad had failed. The legal threats were hollow because he knew I held the evidence of his fraud. He was coming because the empire wasn't just cracking. It was already gone. He was the king of a pile of rubble, and he needed me to hand him a brick so he could pretend he still had a castle. I walked over to the fireplace. I lit a match and threw it onto the dry logs I had stacked earlier. The fire caught instantly, casting a warm orange glow across the room. I sat down in the armchair, Helen's favorite chair, and pulled her letter out of my pocket again. Do not go back to save the people who used you, she had written. Do not go back to patch the holes in a sinking ship that they drilled themselves. I looked at the fire. I am not a lifeguard. I whispered to the empty room. I picked up my phone and forwarded Gerald's threatening text to Mara Lane. Add this to the affidavit, I typed. Then I went to the kitchen and made myself a sandwich. I was hungry. For the first time in a week, I was actually hungry. Let him come. The doors were locked, the cameras were rolling, and the sheriff was only a phone call away. He thought he was coming to demand my surrender. He didn't realize he was driving straight into a crime scene of his own making. The morning light filtering into Mara Lane's conference room was gray and serious, matching the mood of the three people sitting around the polished oak table. I had driven down from the mountains at dawn, leaving the safety of the cabin because the war had shifted fronts. It was no longer about physical intimidation at my front door. It was now a war of numbers, ledgers, and federal crimes. Ethan Price sat across from me. The man looked like he had aged 10 years in 48 hours. His tie was loosened, his top button undone, and he kept wiping his palms on his trousers. He was a good accountant, a man who liked order and symmetry. Working for my father must have been a living hell for him. He pushed a thick binder across the table toward me. I am sorry. Madeline, Ethan said, his voice trembling. I should have come to you sooner. I knew it was wrong, but Gerald, your father, he can be very persuasive and terrifying. I opened the binder. It was not just a balance sheet. It was an autopsy of the Walsh Empire. Walk me through it, Ethan, I said, my voice steady. I need to know exactly how deep the rot goes. Ethan took a deep breath. On the surface, Walsh Development Group looks healthy. He began. We show assets in the mid-8 figures, but that is all valuation based on projected earnings from the Highland Project and the Riverview condos. Liquid cash. We are dry. We have been dry for 18 months. He pointed to a column highlighted in red. To keep operations running. To pay the contractors and the bribe, the lobbying fees. Gerald needed liquidity, but his personal credit is maxed out. The company's credit rating was downgraded 2 years ago after the zoning lawsuit, so he started using the secondary entities. He looked at me, his eyes full of apology. He used the entities named after you: Madeline, the M, Walsh Holdings LLC, the MRW Trust. He opened lines of credit in your name, using your social security number as the guarantor. He funneled the loan proceeds into the main company account to make payroll and pay his country club dues. And then he booked them as owner equity injections. I stared at the numbers. $200,000 here, $50,000 there. It added up. So, the company looks like it is being funded by a wealthy silent partner. I said, exactly. Ethan nodded. And that partner is you. Or rather, the credit identity of you that he stole. The company is currently floating on $3.5 million of debt that is legally yours. If the company folds, the creditors won't go after Gerald. They will come after you. Mara Lane, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. Her eyes were sharp behind her glasses. It is worse than that, she said. I looked at her. How can it be worse? Mara slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a copy of a legal notice filed that morning. This came in an hour ago. Mara said, "It is from Caleb Voss." My stomach dropped. Caleb Voss was my father's silent partner on the Riverview project. He was a man who made my father look like a choir boy. Caleb was old money, ruthless, and he had a team of forensic accountants that made the IRS look lazy. Caleb found a discrepancy. Mara explained. He put in $1 million for materials last month. That money was supposed to go to the steel supplier. Instead, it went into the Walsh Holdings account to pay off the interest on one of the loans Gerald took out in your name. I closed my eyes. That is embezzlement. It is, Mara agreed, and Caleb is not the type to settle quietly. He has filed a preliminary fraud report with the district attorney. He wants to know where his money went. Ethan let out a small whimper. And here is the kicker. Mara continued, her voice dropping to a serious, warning tone. When the investigators start looking, they will see the money move to an account controlled by Walsh. Gerald is going to spin this. He is going to say that you, as the operational manager, diverted the funds. He is going to claim he was the victim of a rogue daughter who was skimming off the top to fund her own lifestyle. I looked at the binder again. The narrative was already being written. Gerald wasn't just using my credit. He was setting up a patsy. So he sacrifices me to save himself from Caleb. I said, he tells Caleb, "Look, my daughter stole from both of us. Let's send her to jail and split what is left." Precisely, Mara said. I felt a cold calm settle over me. It was the same calm I felt when a construction site had a crisis. Panic does not solve problems. Structure solves problems. I looked at Ethan. Ethan, do you have the server logs? I asked. He blinked. The what? The server logs. I repeated. Every time a transfer is made, the banking portal logs the IP address of the device that authorized it. It logs the MAC address. It logs the time down to the second. Yes, Ethan said. I have access to the admin panel. I want you to pull every single transaction from the last 24 months. I commanded. I want you to cross-reference the time of the transfers with my calendar. I turned to Mara. Gerald is sloppy. I said, he does his banking from his iPad in his office or his phone. I do my work from my desktop in the back office. The IP addresses will be different. Furthermore, on the dates of at least 4 of these major transfers, I was physically out of the office. I pulled up my own mental calendar. On November 14th, when $50,000 was moved, I was at a site inspection in Harrisburg with 3 city council members. I have witnesses. On August 3rd, I was in dental surgery. I was under anesthesia when $20,000 was wire transferred. Mara smiled. It was a vicious, satisfied smile. Alibis, better than alibis. I said, mathematical impossibilities. We don't just deny it, Mara. We dismantle it. We build a timeline so airtight that even Gerald's expensive defense attorney will look at it and tell him to plead guilty. I looked at Ethan. You are going to be my star witness. Ethan. Ethan looked terrified. I can't lose my license. Madeline, I have kids. You won't lose your license if you cooperate, Mara interjected smoothly. You are a whistleblower now. But if you stay silent, you are an accomplice. Choose a side. Mr. Price. Ethan looked at the binder, then at me. He nodded slowly. I will get you the logs. I will get you everything. Good, I said. Just then, my phone buzzed on the table. It was a text message. I looked at the screen. The name displayed was Sabrina. I hesitated. I hadn't spoken to her since the incident at the cabin yesterday. Can we talk? Just us. No lawyers. Please. I showed the phone to Mara. She is fishing, Mara said. Or she is wearing a wire. I typed a response. I am done talking. Sabrina, I only listen to the truth now. If you want to talk, you come to Mara Lane's office, you come alone, and you bring your own lawyer, because anything you say can and will be used to save my life. The 3 bubbles appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again, finally, a response. I am scared. Maddie, he is out of control. I didn't reply. I let her sit with her fear. She had let me sit with mine for 30 years. A moment later, the office phone on Mara's desk rang. The receptionist buzzed in. Ms. Lane, I have a Mr. Sterling on line 1. He says he is representing Gerald Walsh. Mara pressed the speaker button. This is Mara Lane. Mara. Good morning. A smooth, oily voice filled the room. This is Arthur Sterling. I think we have a misunderstanding here that has gotten a bit out of hand. Gerald is very upset about this family dispute. He wants to propose a sit-down. Maybe we can work out a settlement regarding the assets before things get messy. I looked at Mara. She didn't even blink. Mr. Sterling, Mara said. Her voice like ice. There is no misunderstanding. There is fraud. There is identity theft. And there is a restraining order being filed as we speak. We are not interested in a settlement. We are interested in a surrender. Now, Mara. Let's be reasonable. Sterling chuckled. But the sound was tight. The girl, excuse me, Ms. Walsh. She is holding on to assets that rightfully belong to the family trust. If we go to court, it could take years. Nobody wins. Gerald is willing to offer her a generous severance package if she signs the deeds back over. I felt a surge of anger, but Mara held up a hand. She is not an employee. Arthur, you cannot offer her severance. She is the owner. And tell your client this, if he files a suit to contest the ownership of the Helen Walsh Trust, he triggers the clause. There was silence on the other end of the line, a long, heavy silence. The what? Sterling asked. Mara picked up a document from her desk. The forfeiture clause. Mara read, Section 8, Paragraph C. In the event that any beneficiary or external party attempts to contest the validity of this trust or the authority of the primary trustee through legal action, 50% of the trust's liquid assets shall be immediately and automatically transferred to the Ashford Glen Community Housing Charity, and the remaining real estate assets shall be placed in a blind conservatorship managed by the state. I stared at Mara. I hadn't known about this. Mara smiled at the speakerphone. Helen called it the Scorched Earth Protocol. Arthur. She knew Gerald. She knew that if he couldn't have the money, he would try to destroy it. But with this clause, if he sues Madeline, he doesn't just lose, he donates his entire empire to the poor people he has spent his career gentrifying out of town. I covered my mouth to hide a gasp. It was brilliant. It was diabolical. Helen had weaponized Gerald's own greed against him. He wanted the money so badly that he couldn't afford to fight for it. I will have to review the document. Sterling stammered. The confidence was gone from his voice. You do that, Mara said. And Arthur, tell Gerald that Caleb Voss just called me. He is very interested in the Walsh Holdings ledger. She hung up the phone. The room was quiet. I looked at the file in front of me. I looked at the empty chair where Helen should have been sitting. She knew. I whispered. She knew exactly what he would do. She knew him better than he knew himself. Mara said softly. She knew that the only thing stronger than his ego is his greed. She put him in a cage where the only key is his own bankruptcy. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the town of Ashford Glen looked peaceful under the gray sky. People were going to work, buying groceries, living their lives. They had no idea that the gleaming tower of the Walsh family was actually a house of cards, held together by lies and my silence. And I was done being silent. I turned back to Ethan and Mara. "Let's organize the timeline," I said. "Sabrina is scared. Gerald is cornered. Caleb is hunting. We don't need to attack them. We just need to stand still and hold up the mirror. They will destroy themselves trying to break it." Ethan opened his laptop. Mara pulled out a legal pad. We worked for 6 hours straight. We built a wall of evidence so high that no amount of lying could scale it. By the time we finished, I wasn't just the defendant. I was the witness, the judge, and the executioner of the Walsh legacy. And as the sun went down, casting long shadows across the conference table, I realized something. I wasn't burning the empire down. The empire had been burning for years. I was just the one who finally decided to stop breathing in the smoke. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Sabrina. "He is making me memorize a script. Maddie, please, I don't want to go to jail." I looked at the message. Then I looked at Mara. "Bring her in," I said. Mara nodded. "It is time to divide and conquer." I picked up the phone to reply. "Tomorrow at 10 in the morning, Mara's office. If you tell Gerald you are coming, the deal is off. This is your one chance to jump off the sinking ship. Sabrina, don't miss it." I hit send. The trap was set. The evidence was secured. And the ghost of Helen Walsh was standing right beside me, holding the match. The conference room in Mara Lane's law firm was designed to intimidate. It was a space of chrome, glass, and polished mahogany, situated on the 4th floor with a view of the street below where normal people lived their normal lives. Inside this room, however, the air was so thick with tension that it felt like breathing through wet wool. I arrived 20 minutes early. I sat on the side of the table facing the door, my back to the window. Mara sat next to me, her laptop open, connected to a small black projector that hummed quietly in the center of the table. We did not speak. We were soldiers checking our ammunition before the enemy crested the hill. At 9:58 in the morning, the heavy glass doors swung open. Gerald Walsh entered first. He was wearing his Navy power suit, the one he wore when he was closing a deal or firing a senior executive. He looked tired. The bags under his eyes were heavy, and his skin had a grayish pallor, but his posture was rigid with aggression. He did not look at me. He walked straight to the chair at the head of the table and pulled it out with a sharp scrape against the floor. Sabrina followed. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. She was wearing sunglasses indoors, and when she took them off, her eyes were swollen. She slumped into the chair furthest from me, clutching her purse like a shield. Marianne came in last, trailing the scent of expensive floral perfume. She looked at me with wide, wet eyes, performing the role of the heartbroken mother. She reached out a hand as if to touch my shoulder as she passed, but I shifted slightly in my seat, and her hand fell to her side. Finally, their lawyer, Arthur Sterling, entered. He was a man who charged $600 an hour to make problems disappear. He carried a leather briefcase and an expression of bored superiority. Gerald didn't wait for pleasantries. He didn't wait for anyone to sit down. He treated the meeting like a staff briefing at the construction site. "All right, let us get this over with," Gerald barked. "Madeline, give Arthur the keys and the passcodes. I am willing to overlook this little tantrum you have thrown. We will attribute it to grief over Helen. You are clearly not thinking straight." He reached for the pitcher of water on the table and poured himself a glass, his hand shaking ever so slightly. I did not move. I did not speak. I simply watched him. It was fascinating to see how his mind worked. He genuinely believed that if he spoke with enough authority, reality would bend to his will. When I didn't respond, Gerald's jaw tightened. "Did you hear me?" I said, "Hand them over. We have a meeting with the zoning commission at 2:00. I need the files on the server." Mara Lane cleared her throat. It was a small sound, but it cut through the room like a knife. "Mr. Walsh," Mara said, her voice cool and level. "This is not a staff meeting, and Madeline is not your employee. She is the opposing party. If you address her directly again, I will end this meeting and we will see you in court. Please direct all comments to me." Arthur Sterling placed a hand on Gerald's arm, silencing him. Arthur opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. Ms. Lane, let us be frank. Arthur said, "We are prepared to file a motion regarding the Helen Walsh Trust. We have reason to believe that the transfer of assets to your client was done under duress. Helen Walsh was heavily medicated in her final months. It is our position that Madeline exerted undue influence over a dying woman to siphon off family assets." I felt a flash of heat in my chest, but I kept my face blank. They were going to paint me as the predator. They were going to say I manipulated the only person who had ever loved me. Arthur continued, looking at me with a sneer. "We are calling it elder abuse, essentially, unless, of course, the assets are returned to the family estate immediately, in which case, Mr. Walsh is generous enough to decline pressing charges." Marianne sniffled loudly. "We just want what is fair. Madeline, your father worked so hard for that money. How could you take it from him?" Mara didn't argue. She didn't get angry. She simply reached out and pressed a key on her laptop. The projector beam cut through the dim light of the room, splashing a large, high-definition image onto the white screen behind Arthur and Gerald. It was a document, a loan application for $300,000. Arthur turned to look at the screen. Gerald squinted. "This is a loan application dated October 14th of last year." Mara said, "The borrower is listed as Madeline Walsh." She clicked a button. The image zoomed in on the signature line. "Is this your signature?" Madeline Mara asked. "No," I said. My voice was calm, contrasting with the pounding of my heart. Mara clicked again. A split screen appeared. On the left was the signature from the loan. On the right was a signature from a birthday card Gerald had sent me years ago. She clicked again. An animated graphic overlaid the two signatures. The loops, the pressure points, the slant, they were identical. "We have a forensic handwriting analysis confirming that the signature on this loan and 6 others was executed by Gerald Walsh." Mara stated, "This is identity theft, Mr. Sterling, and it is bank fraud." Gerald's face turned a mottled shade of red. "That is ridiculous. I have power of attorney. I was managing her finances." Mara clicked the remote. A new document appeared. "This is an email chain between you and Sabrina." Mara said. I watched Sabrina flinch, as if she had been struck. She sank lower in her chair. Mara read the highlighted text on the screen aloud. Gerald to Sabrina. "Don't worry about the credit check. I will use Madeline's profile. She never looks at the statements. We can dump the debt there and keep the main books clean." The room went dead silent. The hum of the projector fan sounded like a jet engine. Arthur Sterling picked up the document from the table, his confident demeanor cracking. He looked at Gerald. "You told me there was no paper trail." Arthur hissed. I didn't think she had the emails Gerald whispered back. Though in the quiet room, it was a shout. Mara wasn't done. She was relentless. She clicked through slide after slide. "Here is the transfer of $50,000 to a shell company in the Caymans, authorized by Madeline Walsh, on a day when Madeline Walsh was under general anesthesia for dental surgery. Here is the withdrawal of $20,000 for a luxury spa retreat, paid for by a credit card in Madeline's name." While Madeline was working a double shift at the office, Marianne looked at the screen, then at Gerald. "You said business was booming," she whispered. "You said the money was from the profits. You were spending her credit." Gerald ignored her. He was staring at me, his eyes filled with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. "You little spy," he snarled. "You sat there in my house, eating my food, and you were collecting evidence." I finally spoke. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "I didn't take anything from you, Gerald," I said. "I didn't take your money. I didn't take your company. I simply stopped letting you steal from me." "You are a Walsh," he shouted, standing up. "You owe this family everything. I owe you nothing." I said, "I paid my debts. I paid them with my credit score. I paid them with my labor. I paid them with my silence for 10 years. The ledger is balanced." Arthur Sterling tried to regain control. "Ms. Lane, these are allegations. Context is key. We could argue that Madeline gave verbal consent for these transactions. Mara smiled. It was the smile of a shark sensing blood. Verbal consent, Mara asked. Let us talk about verbal statements. She minimized the presentation and opened an audio file. This was recorded in the library of the Walsh estate, 14 months ago. Mara said. She pressed play. The sound was crystal clear. It was the conversation I had heard in the cabin, the conversation that had broken my heart and hardened my resolve. Gerald's voice. It is just paper. Helen, just paper. If things go south, the company takes the hit. Madeline pleads ignorance. She gets a slap on the wrist. She doesn't have a reputation to lose like I do. Sabrina's voice. She is desperate to please. We are just saving her the trouble of reading the fine print. The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a vacuum, sucking the air out of the room. Sabrina let out a sob. She covered her mouth with her hand, tears streaming down her face behind her sunglasses. She looked at me, pleadingly, but I looked through her. Marianne was staring at Gerald with horror. Not because he was a criminal, I realized, but because she saw the money disappearing. She saw her lifestyle evaporating. Gerald Marianne gasped. What does this mean? What happens to the house? Arthur Sterling closed his briefcase. He looked at Gerald with open disdain. You need a criminal defense attorney. Gerald, Arthur said coldly, I do not handle federal fraud cases, and I certainly do not handle clients who lie to me about the existence of tapes. Gerald looked around the room. He looked at his weeping wife, his broken daughter, his departing lawyer. Then he looked at me. He didn't look sorry. He looked cornered, and a cornered animal attacks. He slammed his fist onto the table. The water pitcher jumped, spilling water onto the polished wood. You think you have won? Gerald roared, his face purple. You think a few papers and a tape recorder make you the boss? I built this town. I own the judges. I own the council. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You are nothing without me. You are a secretary with a delusion of grandeur. I will bury you. Madeline. I will spend every last dime I have to make sure you rot. You don't have a dime. Gerald, I said softly. That is the point. He made a noise, a guttural, strangled growl. He kicked his chair back, sending it crashing into the wall. Come on! He barked at Marianne and Sabrina. We are leaving. Sabrina didn't move. She was shaking. I said, let's go, Gerald shouted. Sabrina flinched and stood up. She followed him like a ghost. Marianne scrambled after them, clutching her fur coat, shooting one last terrified look at the screen where her husband's crimes were still projected in high definition. The door slammed shut behind them. The glass rattled in the frame. For a long moment, Mara and I just sat there. The only sound was the hum of the projector. Mara reached out and turned it off. The screen went dark. That went well, Mara said. Exhaling a long breath, I looked at my hands. They were steady. I had expected to feel guilty. I had expected to feel sad. But I felt nothing. I felt light. He is going to come back hard. I said, he has nothing to come back with. Mara assured me, Arthur Sterling just fired him. The evidence is overwhelming. We file the restraining order today. We send the fraud packet to the district attorney tomorrow. It is over. Madeline, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that the dragon was slain. I stood up and walked to the window. I watched as Gerald, Sabrina, and Marianne exited the building. I saw Gerald shouting at Sabrina on the sidewalk. I saw him gesticulating wildly, even from 4 stories up. I could see the violence in his movements. They got into Sabrina's car and drove away. I spent the rest of the day in Mara's office, signing affidavits, finalizing the lockout procedures for the properties, and drinking tea that tasted like freedom. At 6 o'clock in the evening, I left the office. The streetlights were on. The snow was falling again, soft and quiet. I walked to my car. I checked my phone. There was an email notification. It was from the county court system. Since I was now a registered party in the dispute, I got automatic updates on filings. I opened the email. I expected to see the confirmation of our restraining order. Instead, the subject line made my blood freeze. Notice of emergency filing case 24 CV 890. Plaintiff, Gerald Walsh. Defendant, Madeline Walsh. Nature of suit theft. By conversion, embezzlement, elder abuse. I stood there in the snow, staring at the screen. He hadn't just denied the claims, he had doubled down. He had filed a preemptive suit accusing me of stealing the money. He was accusing me of the very crime he had committed. I scrolled down to the summary. Plaintiff alleges that defendant, acting as financial manager, systematically diverted company funds to personal accounts and used undue influence to coerce the late Helen Walsh into altering estate documents while mentally incapacitated. He was going to burn the whole thing down. He didn't care if he went to jail. As long as he dragged me down with him, he was willing to destroy Helen's memory, willing to claim she was insane, just to hurt me. My phone rang. It was Mara. I assume you saw it, Mara said, her voice tight. I saw it, I replied. He found a lawyer sleazy enough to file it. Mara said, probably a strip mall ambulance chaser. It is a desperate move. Madeline, it is suicide. It is not suicide, I said, watching the snow fall on the screen of my phone. It is a distraction. He is trying to freeze the assets so I can't use them to fight him. He is trying to bleed me out in legal fees. We will fight it, Mara said. I know. I said. I hung up. I looked at the dark sky. I had thought the meeting was the end. I thought the truth was enough. But I had forgotten who I was dealing with. Gerald Walsh didn't care about the truth. He only cared about winning. I got into my car and locked the doors. The engine roared to life. I looked at the courthouse notification one last time. Theft, embezzlement, abuse. He wanted a war fine. He was about to find out that I hadn't just inherited Helen's money, I had inherited her patience, and unlike him, I had nothing left to lose. I put the car in drive. The night was dark, but the road ahead was clear. Tomorrow, I wouldn't just be a witness. Tomorrow, I would be the storm. The interview room at the county sheriff's department smelled of stale coffee and industrial floor cleaner. It was a small, windowless box designed to make people feel small. And it was working. I sat on one side of a metal table, my hands clasped in front of me to hide a tremor I refused to acknowledge. Across from me sat Detective Miller, a man with a thick mustache and eyes that had seen too many domestic disputes turn violent. To my right sat Mara Lane. She was the only thing in the room that looked sharper than the fluorescent lights. So, let me get this straight. Ms. Walsh, Detective Miller said, tapping a pen against a thick file folder. Your father, a respected businessman in this community, claims you accessed his accounts unauthorized, transferred large sums to offshore entities, and then locked him out of his own company. He also claims you coerced your late stepmother into changing her will while she was heavily medicated. Those are serious accusations. We are talking about theft by conversion, elder abuse, and wire fraud. I took a breath to speak, but Mara's hand touched my arm, a gentle, firm pressure. Silence. Mara opened her briefcase. The sound of the latches clicking open was loud in the quiet room. Detective, Mara said, her voice sounding like gravel wrapped in silk. Mr. Walsh's filing is a work of fiction, a very expensive, very desperate fiction. We are not here to answer his questions. We are here to provide the answers to the questions you should be asking. She slid a binder across the metal table. It was 3 inches thick. This is a notarized timeline of events, Mara continued. Tab A contains the forensic handwriting analysis proving that the loans Gerald Walsh claims my client took out were actually signed by him, forging her name. Tab B contains the IP logs from the bank, showing that the transfers he accuses her of making were authorized from a device with a MAC address registered to his private office computer. Detective Miller stopped tapping his pen. He opened the binder. He flipped to Tab A. He looked at the enlarged signatures. Mara didn't stop. And Tab C, she said, pointing a manicured finger at the page, is the medical affidavit from Helen Walsh's primary physician, confirming she was fully lucid and competent on the day she signed the trust amendment. In fact, we have a video recording of the signing, witnessed by 2 independent notaries. The detective looked up. His eyes narrowed. "You have a video, we do," Mara said. "And we have audio recordings of Gerald Walsh admitting in his own voice that he was using Madeline's identity to secure loans because his own credit was leveraged to the hilt." The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The air pressure changed. It went from an interrogation to a briefing. Miller closed the file folder he had walked in with, the one containing my father's lies, and pushed it to the side. He pulled Mara's binder closer. "If this is true," Miller said, his voice lower, "then he filed a false police report. That is the least of his problems," Mara said. I watched the detective read. For the first time all morning, I felt the tight band around my chest loosen. My father had tried to use the law as a weapon, assuming I would be too scared to fight back. He forgot that the law is a double-edged sword, and he had just grabbed it by the blade. We walked out of the station an hour later. The winter sun was blinding. "Don't get comfortable," Mara warned as we reached her car. "He knows the police report won't stick. He just bought himself 24 hours of chaos, as if on cue." My phone vibrated. It was an encrypted email from Caleb Voss. I opened it in the passenger seat. The subject line was blank. The body of the email contained a single attachment, a PDF of a bank transfer receipt. I zoomed in. My breath hitched. "Look at this," I said, shoving the phone toward Mara. She glanced at it while navigating the icy traffic circle. It was a transfer receipt dated 2 days ago, just hours before I had initiated the final lockdown of the accounts. Gerald had transferred $500,000 from the Walsh Development Group's operating account money that was meant for the contractors into a personal account listed as G. Private Consulting. "He gutted the company," I whispered. He knew the walls were closing in. He tried to grab the cash and run before I could turn off the tap. "This is embezzlement, plain and simple," Mara said, her knuckles tight on the steering wheel. "And Caleb knows it. That is why he sent it to you. He wants you to be the one to hand it to the district attorney. He wants his hands clean." And then, the twist hit me. "Mara, look at the timestamp," I said. She glanced over. 4:45 in the afternoon. That was when he was texting me. I said, "That was when Sabrina was pounding on my door at the cabin. It was a coordinated distraction. He sent them to scream at me, hoping I would be too busy panicking to notice him draining the accounts." Mara's jaw set hard. "We are filing for an emergency injunction," she said, "and we are adding this to the restraining order. This isn't just financial bullying anymore. This is organized criminal activity." We spent the afternoon at the courthouse. The process was exhausting, filling out forms, swearing oaths, waiting for clerks to stamp documents with aggressive thuds. But by 3 o'clock, we had it, a temporary order of protection. Gerald Walsh was legally prohibited from coming within 500 feet of me, my home, or my workplace. But a piece of paper cannot stop a rumor. While we were in the courthouse, my father was busy in the town square. I started getting texts from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Old high school classmates, neighbors, the barista at the coffee shop. "Hey, Maddie, is it true you stole Helen's jewelry?" "Madeline, I heard you cut your dad off because he wouldn't buy you a new car. That's messed up. People are saying you're on drugs. Do you need help?" I sat on a bench in the courthouse hallway, reading the messages. My face burned. He was poisoning the well. He knew he couldn't win in court, so he was trying to destroy my reputation so that no one would believe me. He was painting me as the unstable, greedy, drug-addicted daughter who had broken her poor father's heart. I started to type a reply to one of them. "It's a lie. He's the thief." Then I stopped. "Don't," Mara said, standing over me. She had seen the screen. "He is ruining my name," I said, my voice thick with tears I refused to shed. "I have to live in this town." "Mara, if you engage, you validate him," Mara said sternly. "You get in the mud with a pig. You both get dirty. But the pig likes it. We don't fight rumors with Facebook posts. We fight them with cease and desist orders." She pulled out her phone and dictated a memo to her paralegal. "Draft a letter to Gerald Walsh's counsel. Immediate cease and desist regarding defamatory statements. Cite the specific rumors. Inform them that every single false statement made to a third party will be added as a separate count in the civil defamation suit we are preparing, and send a copy to the editor of the Ashford Gazette, reminding them of their liability if they print unverified allegations. I put my phone away. Silence. It was the hardest weapon to wield, but it was the sharpest. Later that evening, back at the safety of the hotel, I had moved to a chain hotel near the highway, anonymous and secure. My phone rang. It was Sabrina. I stared at the screen. I shouldn't answer. Mara would tell me not to answer, but I needed to know. I picked up. I didn't say hello. Maddie. Her voice was small, shaky. Maddie, please don't hang up. You have 2 minutes. I said. He is crazy. Sabrina whispered. He is tearing the house apart looking for files. He thinks you hid microphones in the walls. Mom is locked in the bedroom crying. I felt a pang of pity, but I crushed it. Pity was what got me into this mess. Tell me about the bank transfer. Sabrina, the $500,000. Did you know? There was a pause, a hesitation. I knew he was moving some money. She stammered. But he told me it was to protect it from you. He said you were going to freeze it and we would starve. You are lying. Sabrina, I said coldly. You knew he was stealing it. You were the distraction. You came to the cabin to keep me busy. No, I just wanted to talk. Stop lying, I snapped. If you want to save yourself, you need to tell the truth. Not to me, to a lawyer. You need to walk into the district attorney's office and tell them that Gerald made you memorize a script. I can't, she sobbed. He is my dad. He is a criminal. Sabrina. And right now, you are his accomplice. Do you look good in orange? Because federal prison is not a fashion show. Maddie. Please, I hung up. I couldn't listen to it. She was still trying to play both sides. She wanted my forgiveness, but she wasn't willing to pay the price of admission, which was the absolute truth. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at the wall. I felt drained, empty. Then, my laptop chimed. A priority email from the bank's fraud detection unit. I opened it. Subject urgent security alert. Unauthorized attempt EMS Walsh. We have detected another attempt to access the primary trust account. This attempt was made via a faxed power of attorney document submitted to our heavy wealth division in New York. He was trying again. He was relentless. I read on. However, our digital forensics team analyzed the metadata of the submitted digital fax. The document contains a tracking dot pattern invisible to the naked eye. We have traced the source machine. I scrolled down. Source Canon Image Runner Advance. Serial number CN 892201. Location Walsh Development Group. Executive Office. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. He was so arrogant. He thought he could just print out a fake document and fax it over, assuming the bank was too stupid to check. He didn't realize that modern printers leave a fingerprint on every single page. He had just handed us the smoking gun. Not only was he trying to steal, but he was doing it from his office, using company equipment, creating a direct physical link between him and the crime. I called Mara. We got him. I said, "Did he try again?" she asked, sounding tired but alert. He faxed a fake power of attorney an hour ago. I said, "The bank traced the printer's serial number to his office." Mara let out a low whistle. "He is flailing," she said. "He is drowning and he is thrashing around. But all he is doing is letting more water into his lungs. Send it to the police." I said, "Send it to Detective Miller. Send it to Caleb Voss. Send it to everyone." "I will," Mara said. Madeline. "Yes. Lock your door. A man this desperate is dangerous." I looked at the heavy deadbolt on the hotel room door. It was locked, but I walked over and put the chain on too. I went to the window and looked out at the parking lot. The snow was piling up on the cars. He had started the rumors to isolate me. He had filed the lawsuit to drain me. He had sent his family to harass me. But every single time he moved, he left a footprint. He told me I wouldn't last a week. It had been 4 days. And in those 4 days, he had committed 3 felonies, lost his lawyer, and alienated his business partner. I wasn't the one who wouldn't last. I closed the curtains. Let him scream. Let him lie. The paper trail was a noose, and he was tying it tighter with his own hands. All I had to do was wait for him to kick the chair away. The snow outside Mara Lane's office window had turned from a pristine white to a slushy gray paste, churned up by the tires of 1,000 cars. It was an ugly transformation, but it felt appropriate. We were in the ugly part of the story now. The adrenaline of the initial rebellion had faded, leaving behind the dull, aching reality of dismantling a family. I sat in the leather chair, staring at the document Mara had placed in front of me. It was a settlement agreement, a lifeline. "Are you sure you want to offer them this?" Mara asked, her voice low. She was standing by the coffee machine, brewing a fresh pot. It was 4 in the afternoon, but the sky was already dark. "I am not offering them mercy." "Mara," I said, tracing the edge of the paper, "I am offering them a way out before the district attorney turns this into a spectacle. If they sign this, they waive all claims to the trust. They acknowledge my ownership. In exchange, I agree not to press for immediate criminal charges regarding the identity theft, provided they pay back the principal of the loans within 5 years. It is generous," Mara noted. "Too generous. Gerald tried to frame you for embezzlement 48 hours ago." "I know." I said, "but I am tired. I don't want to spend the next 5 years in a courtroom listening to my father lie. I want to cut the cord. I want them gone." Mara brought the coffee over. "The catch is Sabrina," she said. "Gerald will never sign. He would rather burn in hell than admit defeat. But if Sabrina signs, if Sabrina breaks rank, his case collapses. He cannot claim it was a family conspiracy if half the family admits it was fraud." My phone buzzed. It was a text from Sabrina. "We are in the lobby. Mom is with me. He is not." I looked at Mara. "Send them in." When the door opened, the air in the room seemed to grow heavier. Marianne entered first. She looked frail. The bravado from the cabin was gone, replaced by a trembling fragility that I suspected was only half-acted. She wasn't wearing her fur coat today. She was wearing a simple wool cardigan, looking like a grandmother who had lost her way. Sabrina followed. She looked like a ghost. Her skin was pale, her eyes rimmed with red, and her hair, usually perfectly blown out, was pulled back in a messy bun. She refused to make eye contact with me. They sat down on the opposite side of the table. The distance between us was only 4 feet of mahogany, but it felt like an ocean. "I am going to keep this simple," I said, skipping the pleasantries. Mara pushed the documents toward them. "This is a waiver of claim and an admission of fact," Mara explained. "It states that you, Sabrina Walsh and Marianne Walsh, acknowledge that the transfers made from the Walsh Development Group were unauthorized by Madeline Walsh. It states that you acknowledge the validity of the Helen Walsh Trust. If you sign this, Madeline agrees to petition the court to seal the civil records. You walk away with your freedom, but without the money." Marianne let out a sob. It was a wet, ragged sound. "Madeline, please," she whispered, reaching for a tissue. "How can you be so cold? We are your family. I changed your diapers. I sat by your bed when you had chickenpox. Doesn't that mean anything?" I looked at her. It did mean something. That was the problem. It meant enough that I was sitting here offering them a life raft instead of letting them drown. "It means I am giving you a chance." "Marianne," I said, "but do not talk to me about love. Love is not watching your husband steal your daughter's identity. Love is not standing by while he tries to send her to prison." Marianne wept harder. "He is desperate. Maddie, he is not himself. He loves you. He just gets confused with the numbers." "He is not confused," I said sharply. "He is calculating." Sabrina had not moved. She was staring at the pen lying on top of the document. Her hands were clenched in her lap. "Sabrina," I asked. She looked up. Her eyes were terrified. "If I sign this," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "he will kill me. Not literally, but he will destroy me. I have nowhere to go. Maddie, I have no money. I have no degree. I have never had a job interview in my life. If he cuts me off, you are already cut off," I said, The money is gone. Sabrina, the only thing you have left to lose is your freedom. If this goes to trial, and the fraud comes out, you are an accomplice. You signed the minutes of the board meetings where these fake loans were discussed. I saw your signature. Sabrina flinched. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. It was Helen's journal. I had found it in the box at the cabin, buried beneath the financial records. I opened it to a page marked with a yellow ribbon. Helen wrote this 3 years ago. I read aloud, my voice steady in the quiet room. They will call you selfish when you stop feeding them. They will say you have changed. They will scream that you are cruel. But Madeline, remember this. A parasite always hates the host when the host takes the medicine. I close the book. I am taking the medicine. Sabrina, I am not being cruel. I am just refusing to be the host anymore. Sabrina looked at the book. Then she looked at Marianne, who was busy playing the victim. Then she looked at me. Something shifted in her face. It wasn't courage, exactly. It was the desperation of a cornered animal realizing the trap wasn't set by me, but by her father. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Her hand was shaking so badly she almost dropped it. I have something, she stammered. Mara leaned forward. What is it? Sabrina unlocked the phone. She tapped the screen a few times and placed it on the table. He made me practice last night, she said, tears spilling over her cheeks. He wrote a script. He made me say it over and over again until I got the tone right. He recorded it to make sure I sounded convincing. She pressed play. The audio was clear. I could hear the hum of the HVAC system in my father's study. I could hear the clink of ice in a glass. Gerald's voice. No, do it again. You sound too guilty. You need to sound confused. Like a ditz. Say it again. Sabrina's voice shaky. I didn't know Maddie was moving the money. I just signed what she put in front of me. She told me it was for tax purposes. Gerald's voice. Good, but add a little cry at the end. Say, I trusted my sister. The jury loves a betrayed sister. Do it. Sabrina's voice. I trusted my sister. Gerald's voice. Perfect. Listen to me. Sabby, she is the sacrifice. We have to cut the limb to save the body. You are the body. She is just overhead. Once she is in jail, we can contest the trust. We will get it all back. Just stick to the script. The recording ended. I felt a physical blow to my chest, even though I knew who he was. Hearing him call me overhead, hearing him plan my incarceration like a business restructuring it tore something open inside me. Marianne had stopped crying. She was staring at the phone, her mouth open. Even she couldn't spin this. I looked at Sabrina. Why are you showing me this? Because I am not the body, Sabrina whispered. I am just another limb he is going to cut off when he is done with you. Mara looked at me. Her eyes were wide. This changes everything, Mara said. This is witness tampering. This is conspiracy. Madeline, if Sabrina testifies to this, if she submits this audio, Gerald goes away for a long time, and the lawsuit against you evaporates instantly. I looked at my sister. For 37 years, she had been my tormentor. She had been the golden child who mocked my clothes, my work, my life. But right now, she was just a frightened woman realizing she had been worshipping a false god. I pushed the document toward her. I can't protect you from him. Sabrina, I said, but I can protect you from the law. If you sign this, and if you agree to hand that recording over to the district attorney, I will pay for your lawyer. I will give you enough money to start over, somewhere far away from here. Sabrina stared at the paper. He will come for me, she said. Let him come, I said. He is a paper tiger. Sabrina. And you are holding the match. Sabrina picked up the pen. The tip hovered over the signature line. Suddenly, the outer door of the office suite crashed open. We could hear the receptionist shout, Sir, you cannot go in there. The conference room door flew open. Gerald Walsh stood there. He was breathless. His face flushed a deep, alarming red. He was wearing a trench coat over his suit, and he looked like a man who had completely lost his tether to reality. Don't you do it, he roared. Sabrina jumped, dropping the pen. She shrank back into her chair. pulling her knees up as if to shield herself. Gerald ignored me. He ignored Mara. He marched toward Sabrina, his finger pointing like a weapon. "You stupid girl," he hissed. "You think I don't know where you are? You think I don't track your phone? Get up. Get up right now. We are leaving." Mara stood up. She was small, but she projected authority. "Mr. Walsh, you are violating a restraining order. I am calling the police." "Call them," Gerald shouted, not looking away from Sabrina. "By the time they get here, she will be gone." He grabbed the back of Sabrina's chair and shook it. "I said get up. You are going to ruin everything. You are weak. Sabrina, just like your mother. I told you what to do." Sabrina looked at him. She was shaking violently. This was the dynamic of our entire lives. He commanded, and we obeyed. Fear was the currency of the Walsh family. But then, she looked at the phone on the table. The phone that held the recording of him calling her a body part to be saved. Sabrina looked at me. I didn't speak. I just nodded. "Do it." Sabrina picked up the pen again. "Put it down," Gerald screamed, reaching for her hand. "Don't touch me," Sabrina shrieked. It was a sound I had never heard from her. It was primal. She pulled her arm back, ripping it from his grasp. "I am not your script," she yelled, her voice cracking. "I am not your body." Gerald froze, shocked by the defiance. In that split second of hesitation, Sabrina slammed the pen down onto the paper. She scribbled her signature. It was messy, jagged, and desperate, but it was there. She pushed the paper toward Mara. "I signed it," she gasped, sobbing. "I signed it." Gerald stared at the paper. Then he looked at Sabrina. His face went from red to a terrifying, pale gray. "You are dead to me," he whispered. It was worse than the screaming. "You are nothing. You are a waitress. You are trash." Mara was already on the phone with the police dispatch. "He is here right now. Yes, we have a protective order." Gerald looked at me. His eyes were empty. There was no soul there, just a calculator trying to divide by zero. He didn't lunge at me. He didn't scream. He straightened his coat. He looked at his watch. "You will regret this," he said calmly. "Both of you. You don't know what you have started." He turned and walked out. He didn't wait for the police. He walked out with the strange, stiff gait of a man who knows the building is collapsing but refuses to run. The room was silent except for Sabrina's sobbing. Marianne was sitting frozen, staring at the door, realizing she had just been left behind by the man she had worshipped for 30 years. I reached across the table and took the paper. The ink was still wet. Mara hung up the phone. "The police are 2 minutes out," she said. "They will pick him up outside." I looked at Sabrina. She had her head on the table, her shoulders heaving. "You did it," I said softly. Sabrina didn't look up. "Is it over?" she mumbled. "No," Mara said, her voice grave. She picked up the phone containing the recording. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in her own eyes. "This recording ends the fraud case," Mara said. "But it starts something else. When a narcissist loses control of his family, he doesn't just walk away." She looked at the darkening window. "Tomorrow is the hearing for the permanent injunction and the asset forfeiture." Mara said, "Tomorrow is the deciding session. We have backed him into a corner with no exit." She paused, looking at the signed document. "There is no turning back now." "Madeline, we didn't just burn the bridge. We blew up the cliff." I nodded. I knew. I looked at the door where my father had stood. I knew he wasn't going home to sleep. He was going to plan one last, catastrophic move. Let him. I thought, I have the truth. I have the witness. And for the first time in my life, I have the pen. The courtroom was smaller than I expected for the place where an empire would officially die. It was a hearing room in the civil division, smelling of floor wax and old paper, with fluorescent lights that hummed a low, monotonous note. There was no jury today. This was a hearing for a permanent injunction and a summary judgment on the asset dispute. It was just me, Mara, the judge, and the remnants of the Walsh family. Gerald sat at the defendant's table. He had fired the strip mall lawyer who filed the emergency motion and hired a new one from the city, a man named Mr. Vance, who looked expensive and bored. Sabrina sat behind them, staring at her knees. Marianne was not there. She had claimed a migraine, but I knew the truth. She was hedging her bets. If Gerald won, she would claim she was too sick to stop him. If he lost, she would claim she was too sick to help him. The proceedings began with Gerald playing the role of his life. He stood up when the judge asked for his statement. He did not look like the raging maniac who had stormed into Mara's office yesterday. He looked like a broken patriarch. He hunched his shoulders. He adjusted his tie with trembling hands. "Your Honor," Gerald said, his voice thick with manufactured emotion. "This is a tragedy, a family tragedy. My daughter, Madeline, has always been troubled. She struggled with feelings of inadequacy. When my late wife passed, Madeline suffered a break from reality. She has fabricated this entire narrative to punish us. She locked us out of our home. She froze the company accounts. She is holding the family hostage because of a delusion." He paused, wiping a non-existent tear from his eye. "I built this company from nothing. Your Honor, I built it for my children. The idea that I would steal from my own daughter is absurd. I was merely managing the family assets, moving funds to protect them from her erratic behavior. I am asking the court to grant me emergency conservatorship over Madeline Walsh so I can get her the help she needs and restore order to our lives. It was a good performance. If I did not know him, I might have believed it. He was the benevolent king, weeping for his lost sheep." The judge turned to Mara. "Ms. Lane, your response." Mara did not stand up immediately. She arranged 3 neat stacks of paper on the table. Then she rose. "Your Honor, we are not here to discuss feelings. We are here to discuss felonies." She walked to the podium. "Mr. Walsh claims he was managing assets. We have prepared a timeline of this management." Mara projected the first slide onto the screen set up to the side of the bench. "Timeline point 1, Mara said. "October 14th. A loan for $300,000 is taken out in Madeline Walsh's name. The digital signature was created at 4 in the afternoon. At 4 in the afternoon on that day, Madeline Walsh was in a deposition for a zoning hearing. We have the court transcript. She could not have signed it." She clicked the remote. "Timeline point 2, November 3rd. $50,000 transferred to an offshore shell company. The authorization came from a mobile device. We subpoenaed the carrier logs. The device was located at the Golden Tee Golf Course. Madeline Walsh does not play golf. Gerald Walsh, however, had a tea time at 1 o'clock. Mr. Vance, Gerald's lawyer, stood up. Objection. Circumstantial." The judge waved a hand. "Overruled. Continue." "Ms. Lane," Mara clicked again. "Timeline point 3, the threat." She played the audio from the cabin. The sound of Gerald's voice filled the courtroom, clear and undeniable. "She is an asset. She is the only asset I have left that is not mortgaged to the hilt." Gerald stiffened in his chair. He looked at Mr. Vance, but the lawyer was staring at the table. Realizing he had been handed a losing hand, "This establishes motive." "Your Honor," Mara said, "but we have more than motive. We have the mechanism of the crime." Mara held up the fax that the bank had intercepted 2 days ago, the one Gerald had sent in a panic. 2 days ago, after a temporary restraining order was in place, a power of attorney document was faxed to the bank in an attempt to withdraw funds. The document claimed to be signed by Madeline Walsh. She placed the paper on the overhead projector. Modern office printers imprint a microscopic code of yellow dots on every page they print, identifying the serial number of the machine and the time of printing. It is a counterfeiting measure. She zoomed in until the faint pattern was visible. This document was printed on a Canon image runner, serial number ending in 201. That printer is located in the executive suite of Walsh Development Group. The timestamp is 6:30 in the evening. At 6:30, Madeline Walsh was in a police station filing a report. Gerald Walsh was seen entering the office building at 6:15 by the security guard. The courtroom was silent. This was not interpretation. This was math. It was a chain of evidence that wrapped around Gerald's neck and pulled tight. Mr. Vance leaned over and whispered something to Gerald. Gerald shook his head violently. No, Gerald hissed. Loud enough for me to hear. I am not settling. Gerald stood up, ignoring his lawyer's attempt to pull him down. This is a setup, he shouted, pointing at me. She hacked the system. She is the one who moved the money. She is trying to frame me because she is jealous, Mr. Walsh. Sit down, the judge warned. I won't sit down, Gerald roared. He turned his eyes on me. They were wild, desperate. Look at her. She is sitting there so smug. You think you are smart, Madeline. You are nothing. You are a glorified secretary. He slammed his hand on the table. You wouldn't last 1 week without me, he screamed. I gave you a life. I gave you a name. You would be starving in the street if it wasn't for me. The echo of his voice bounced off the walls. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but strong, like the pillars of a bridge that had finally been tested and held firm. I looked him in the eye. I have lived my entire life without you. Gerald. I said. My voice was not loud, but in the silence, it carried. I lived 34 years without your love. I lived 34 years without your respect. I lived 34 years without a father, because all I had was a boss who didn't pay me. I took a step forward. You said I wouldn't last a week. It has been 5 days. And in those 5 days, I haven't starved. I haven't begged. I have flourished. But you, look at you. I gestured to his disheveled suit, his red face, his empty side of the room. It only took 1 week to prove that I didn't need you to survive. It took 1 week to prove that the only thing keeping you alive was me. And I am done being your life support. Gerald looked like he was about to stroke out. His mouth opened and closed. She is lying, he sputtered, turning to the judge. She is a liar. Ask her sister. Sabrina knows. Sabrina will tell you. He spun around to Sabrina. Tell him. Sabrina. Tell him Madeline is the one who stole the money. Tell him the script. The room turned its attention to Sabrina. She looked small, trembling in her coat. She stood up slowly. Ms. Walsh, the judge asked. Do you have anything to add? Sabrina looked at Gerald. For a moment, I thought she would fold. I thought the lifetime of conditioning would win. Then, she looked at me. She saw the notebook on the table, Helen's notebook. Sabrina took a breath. He wrote a script. Sabrina said. Her voice was shaking, but the words were clear. He wrote a script for me to memorize. He told me to say that Madeline stole the money. He told me that if I didn't say it, I would be cut off. He told me that Madeline was just overhead to be cut to save the body. Liar, Gerald shrieked. You ungrateful traitor. Sabrina didn't flinch this time. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. I have the recording, Your Honor, she said. I have him telling me to lie. And I have the minutes of the board meetings where he practiced forging Madeline's signature. I was there. I watched him do it. She looked at Gerald, tears streaming down her face. I am not the body, Daddy, and I am not lying for you anymore. Gerald collapsed into his chair. It wasn't a physical collapse, but a spiritual one. The air went out of him. The delusion bubble had finally popped. But he had one last, ugly card to play. He looked up, his eyes full of malice. It was Helen, he muttered. What the judge asked? It was Helen, Gerald said, his voice rising again. She was crazy. She had dementia. She didn't know what she was signing when she made that trust. Madeline took advantage of a sick old woman. That trust is invalid. Mara stepped forward again. She looked bored now. Your Honor, Mara said, I would like to submit Exhibit D, the complete medical file of Helen Walsh from the last year of her life. Included is a neurological evaluation performed 2 days before the trust was finalized. She handed a file to the bailiff. Helen Walsh scored 30 out of 30 on the cognitive assessment. She was physically frail, yes, but her mind was sharper than anyone in this room, and she left a handwritten letter of intent, explicitly stating that her goal was to protect the assets from her husband's gambling and debt. Mara turned to Gerald. She wasn't crazy. Gerald. She was just watching you. She saw you stealing, and she spent her final days building a cage for you. The judge read the file. He closed it. He looked at Gerald Walsh with an expression of pure distaste. The court has seen enough. The judge said. He banged his gavel. The petition for a permanent injunction is granted. The ownership of the assets by the Helen Walsh Trust is confirmed. The motion for emergency conservatorship is denied with prejudice. The judge paused, looking at the stack of evidence Mara had presented. Furthermore, given the evidence of forgery, wire fraud, and witness tampering presented in this court, I am referring this entire file to the District Attorney's Office for immediate criminal investigation. Mr. Walsh, I suggest you do not leave the state. Gerald didn't move. He just sat there, staring at the table. The Empire wasn't just burning, it was ash. I walked out of the courtroom 5 minutes later. I didn't look back at Gerald. I didn't look back at Sabrina, though I knew I would see her later to help her start her new life. I walked out of the heavy double doors and into the lobby. Mara was beside me. "You did good," Mara said quietly. I nodded. "Is it over?" "The legal fight, yes," Mara said. "The criminal case against him will take months. He will likely take a plea deal to avoid a public trial. He is done. Madeline, he is bankrupt, and he is going to prison." I pushed open the front doors of the courthouse. The cold air hit me, just like it had on Christmas Eve. It was snowing again, big, fat flakes drifting down from a gray sky. I stood on the steps and took a deep breath. My phone was in my pocket. It was silent. No frantic texts, no demands, no alarms. I pulled it out and looked at it. The screen was black. For the first time in 10 years. Nobody needed me to fix anything. The silence wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. I thought about the keys I had dropped on the table. I thought about the car I had left in the driveway. I thought about the woman who had walked out into the snow with nothing but an envelope. Sabrina had been right about one thing. It had been exactly 1 week. But she had been wrong about the outcome. I buttoned my coat. I looked at the city of Ashford Glen, stretched out before me. It looked different now. It didn't look like a responsibility. It looked like a place. Just a place. I turned to Mara. "I think I'm going to take a vacation," I said. Mara smiled. A real smile. "Where to, I don't know," I said, watching the snow melt on my hand. "Somewhere warm. Somewhere they have never heard the name Walsh." I started walking down the steps, my boots crunching on the salt. My sister said I wouldn't last a week without them. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs and looked back at the courthouse, a massive stone fortress that held the wreckage of my past. It turned out, I only needed a week to prove the truth. They were the ones who needed the structure. They were the ones who needed the lies. I was the only one strong enough to walk away. And as I turned the corner, leaving the shadow of the building behind me, I finally let go. I let the anger go. I let the fear go. I let the need to be needed go. The Empire had burned down, and from the ashes, for the first time in my life, I was finally, truly, breathing. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from your car, your office, or maybe while cooking dinner? Please leave a comment below to share your location and your thoughts on Madeline's revenge. Don't forget to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people who need to hear it. See you in the next one.